You ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels? You're trying so hard to change to get better, but somehow you just end up right back where you started? It's super frustrating, right? We all want to improve, but how does real, lasting change actually happen? Well, let's dive into the powerful ideas behind atomic habits and figure that out.
I mean, it really all boils down to this one question, doesn't it? This is the heart of every New Year's resolution, every goal we ever set for ourselves. It's all about closing that gap between who we are right now and the person we really hope we can be. So, to really wrap our heads around the answer, let's start with this amazing analogy from James Clear's work. Picture a plane, okay? It's sitting on the runway in New York, and its destination is Los Angeles. Now, right before takeoff, the pilot makes a tiny, almost unnoticeable adjustment to the heading, just 3 degrees. That tiny little shift, something you would never even notice at the beginning of the trip, well, it compounds over thousands of miles. The plane doesn't just miss LA by a little bit. Nope, it lands in a completely different country. And that, right there, is exactly how our habits work. This brings us to the core math behind the whole idea of atomic habits. See, it's not about making some huge, life-altering change overnight. It's about the absolutely staggering power of getting just 1% better every single day. And when you look at the numbers, it's kind of mind-blowing. If you improve by just 1% every day for a year, you don't end up 365% better. No, because of compounding, you end up almost 38 times better. And, the flip side is just as scary. If you get 1% worse each day, you basically slide all the way down to 0. But here's the catch, and this is so important. In the beginning, that 1% improvement, it feels like nothing. You're putting in the work, you're trying, but you just aren't seeing the results. This is what's called the valley of disappointment. And it's the exact reason most of us give up, just before that compounding curve is about to take off like a rocket. So, understanding this leads to a pretty major shift in our thinking. It means we have to rethink one of the most common pieces of advice we've ever heard. We have to challenge our obsession with setting goals. Now, for a lot of us, this sounds completely backward, right? But Claire makes a great point. Winners and losers, they often have the exact same goals. Every team in the league wants to win the championship. The goal isn't what makes the difference. It's the system of daily practice and small improvements that actually gets one of them there. See, a goal is about a single outcome. You run the marathon, you cross the finish line, and then what? The motivation just disappears. A system, though, that's the whole process you follow. It's not about the finish line. It's about the act of putting on your shoes and running, day in and day out. That's what ensures you're always getting better. To build a system that really works, we've got to understand that there are 3 layers to changing our behavior. Most of us, we start at the top, focusing on the outcome. I want to lose 20 pounds. Some of us focus on the process. I'm going to start this new workout plan. But the most powerful, the most lasting change, it always starts at the deepest level, your identity. And this is the real game changer. The true goal isn't just to get a result, it's to actually change who you believe you are. When you start to see yourself as a runner or a reader or an artist, your actions just naturally start to line up with that new identity. Every single workout, every page you read, it becomes a vote for the person you're becoming. Okay, so if we want to build these systems that change our identity, how do we actually do it? This is where we get the practical, hands-on toolkit. These are the 4 laws of change, and they give us a step-by-step guide for building good habits and, just as importantly, breaking bad ones. But first, we need to understand the engine that drives everything. Every single habit you have, good, bad, whatever, it follows this simple 4-step pattern. There's a cue that triggers a craving, which leads to a response, which then gives you a reward. The 4 laws are just levers we can pull to take control of this loop. So, law number 1 is all about that first step, the cue. For a good habit to even have a chance of starting, the trigger for it needs to be completely unmissable. It's all about designing your environment so the right choice is the most obvious one. A super simple but crazy effective way to do this is something called an implementation intention. Don't just vaguely say, I'm going to read more. No, get specific. I will read for 15 minutes at 7 a.m. in my kitchen. That clarity just erases any confusion and makes the cue to act loud and clear. Okay, next up, Law 2.
We have to supercharge the craving. Our brains are literally wired to repeat things that we expect will feel good. So the more attractive, the more appealing we can make a habit, the more our brains are going to crave doing it.
And temptation bundling is a genius way to pull this off. For example, maybe you decide you're only allowed to listen to your favorite podcast while you're on the treadmill. You're pairing something you have to do with something you want to do, which makes the whole thing way more attractive.
Law 3 is all about the response. Look, human beings are fundamentally designed to follow the path of least resistance. We are wired to conserve energy. The more work, the more friction there is to doing a habit, the less likely we are to stick with it. So what does that mean? It means we have to make our good habits as frictionless as possible. You want to work out in the morning? Lay your gym clothes out the night before. Want to eat healthier? Prep your veggies over the weekend. You have to make the right choice, the easiest choice. And finally, we have to close the loop. Law 4 is about the reward. Our brains love immediate gratification. For a habit to really stick, it has to feel successful, and it has to feel successful right away. You know, this is why something like a habit tracker can be so powerful. That simple little act of drawing an X on a calendar, that gives your brain a tiny hit of satisfaction. It sends a signal that says, hey, good job, that was worth it. And that immediate little reward is what makes you want to do it again tomorrow. Okay, so that's the whole framework. It sounds great in theory, but I know what you're thinking. Where on earth do I even begin? And that brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial piece of advice. It's called the 2-minute rule, and it says that any new habit you start should take less than 2 minutes to do. So your goal isn't run a marathon. Your new habit is put on my running shoes. That's it. Anyone can do that. It makes the act of starting, which is always the hardest part, almost effortless. You master the art of just showing up. And that brings us right back to that plane on the runway. A huge change in your life doesn't start with some huge, heroic action. It starts with a tiny 2-minute shift in your direction. So the question I'll leave you with is this. What's the tiny, almost unnoticeable change you can make today that will land you in a completely different and way better destination a few years from now?